Hi everyone, this is Wolf Branch Homestead. Welcome to our first video getting ready for the 2022 and 2023 deer season. We go to our local processors and we pick up deer hides that are going to normally be discarded and trashed. So what happens is people will harvest a deer and they'll take it to their processor where they'll get the meat and they'll either eat that themselves or they will donate it to somebody. I think some of our food banks, as long as you have tag and things like that, you can actually donate the meat. But a lot of people will keep it and consume it themselves so that the deer doesn't go to waste and they do something responsible with it. But a lot of times people don't do anything with the hides, the heads, the legs, things like that. At the moment I'm down here at the shop where I'm going to do all of my processing of the hides and getting them ready to tan. We're down here just because it's blocking a little bit of the wind noise, but we're going to basically kind of go over what I'm doing first to get ready. So what we're going to do is go to the processor and pick up a few different things. We'll pick up the legs because we can take these legs and break them down into a few different things. So we'll take the hide off of the leg and throw it in when we're tanning the big hide. We'll remove the hooves, and a lot of people use these for crafting. They make really nice rattles. We'll take the sinew off of the back, and we'll also take that bone and make our bone needles with them. If you haven't seen it, that is one of our articles that made it into Mother Earth News. It was a full feature article, and we were so proud of that to be able to share it with other people and encourage them to get more hands-on with a harvest and reduce that waste. We take the bone and we break it down and shape them into needles, and a lot of people, they use them just for display or they'll actually use them for practical purposes. The reason I started making these was that I was making a deer hide quiver from a hide that we picked up from a processor, and I was making it for my husband as a gift. I went to make this quiver and I noticed that my leather sewing needles, even though I had punched a hole in it with an awl already, they were bending really bad and they just weren't holding up. So I made a bone needle instead. I remembered being a kid and finding a piece of bone at my grandmother's farm, and I shaped it on some concrete, and I actually got it kind of sharp to a point. So I kind of used the same thing. I found a piece of sandstone and I shaped the bone and I drilled a hole through the back, and I was able to use this to sew up the quiver for my husband. And I thought that it would be a really neat thing to share with other people, and I've just been so surprised by not only the amount of people that have saved the article and responded so well to that, but also the people that have ordered them from us on Etsy, and we're really thankful for that. We're glad to be able to share it with people. Now we're going to get those legs, but we're also going to get the hides. The hides are going to be cut off in the processing, and a lot of the times they're just going to go to waste, they're going to get tossed. Unless somebody has requested to have the hide cut in a shoulder mount or a head mount, something like that. A lot of people don't get the full mount, they'll just get the head or the shoulder mount for, you know, a prize deer or a first deer. So the hide's just going to go to waste. And a lot of the time what they'll do is they'll cut the tail off. The tail will still have the bone in it, so we'll have to debone this tail. And then we'll also take the whole hide and get it cleaned up and get it ready to tan. So that's what we're going to collect, is the legs and the hide. Now we're going to go on to some of our books that we use to get some more information and learn more about tanning. We're down here at the shop where all of our process is going to start at. And right here are two of the books that I've used in getting started in tanning. It's on a little bit of OSB here, just because we're going to be using this to insulate the shop and put it up on the inside walls. But the first book that I got started with was Monty Birch's The Ultimate Guide to Skinning and Tanning. And you learn more about processing different fur bearers, cattle, deer, all sorts of things. And you'll learn about different tanning methods. This is a really great place to get started at. And this is where we learned about salt and alum tanning. That's the process that we're going to be using. We do not use the brains for tanning just because chronic wasting disease is a really big problem, and it's finally showed up in Alabama, so we just want to be as careful as possible. And that way, these are not naturally but chemically tanned, but we know that we're not using that brain material. Deer Skins into Buckskins by Matt Richards is also a really great read, and I was glad that we picked this up because this goes into a lot more detail into the hows and whys of what you're doing. Combined, this has been a really great resource set for us to get into the tanning process. And if you're interested in any of these books, We'll put some links to our Amazon, things that we use on there. We're part of the Amazon affiliate program, so that if you use one of the links that we put up and you order something through that, then we get a small compensation out of that, and it goes back to help the homestead and keep us going with some of the supplies that we're going to use and things like that, and we really appreciate it. Now, we talk more about these books in some of the other videos we've done. This first introduction video, we're not going to go through really talking about the tools so much, because we've already covered that. We'll put some links also for videos that we've done in the past that are really going to play into this series of tanning for this year. So we've done one already talking about some of the materials we're going to need. We'll need our salt and our alum for making our tanning solution that we're going to be using. We'll need a way to boil the water and dissolve that material, and something to contain the cooled water solution that we're going to be using with the salt and the alum that'll also contain the hide in that solution. You don't want to use metal for that. You don't want to use something like a metal trash can because you don't want it to rust. So we'll use something like a really durable plastic trash bin. An important piece of equipment we really haven't shown or talked about just yet is going to be the bin that we put our hide in to soak in the solution. So for us, we're going to use something like a plastic trash bin. We want to make sure it has a lid on it so nothing can get in there and mess with the hide. Nobody or no pets can get into it, things like that. We don't want to use metal because metal will rust. You're going to have different chemicals in it, and you're going to have water in it constantly, so you don't want it to rust. You also want a really thick can that you're going to be using, because you don't want to be transporting this and rolling it around and all of a sudden you have holes show up in the bottom. One of our ones that we previously used did that, and it got a hole in the bottom and started leaking out. So we don't want that. We want something really durable. This one has a lid on it, has a handle, and it'll roll, and it's a really sturdy trash can. This is the first year using this one, so we'll let you know how it does as we go through the year. Another thing you're going to want is something like a Rubbermaid or another extra can to go and pick up your hides in. So what we're going to do today is, because we're only getting one, just because everything is just now opening up and it was just the youth gun season, so we only have one hide to pick up, we're going to just go with a Rubbermaid this time. We don't necessarily need a lid on it because we're going to have it in the back of the truck, but if you're going to have it, especially if you have a lot of them at one time, you want to make sure you have something with a lid on it, especially if you have a little bit of a drive with it. One important thing to remember is having a lid on your transportation containers and the ones where you're going to have everything soaking in the solution, is you want to make sure that no animals can get into it, no other people. Make sure you keep younger children away from it, because you are using that alum in there, so you're going to have that in the solution, and you don't want somebody getting in there and messing in that solution and getting it on themselves. When we handle this, we're going to have gloves on, so we're not going to get it on our skin. And another thing is, in preventing animals from getting to it, especially yellow jackets. We have a really big problem with yellow jackets here, and when we get to handling these hides, they will come in swarms and immediately start coming to where you're at. So keeping everything closed up where flies and yellow jackets can't get to it is a really important thing. In the Ultimate Guide to Skinning and Tanning by Monty Birch, we already have this page bookmarked for the salt and alum formula. For 2 gallons of water, you're going to need 1 pound of alum and 2 pounds of salt. It'll talk more about how to dissolve this material and get ready with your solution. That's what we're going to use again for this process, is the salt and the alum. We're not going to need that much just because we're doing one hide, but we're going to need a lot more material when we go to pick up multiple hides. This is why when it comes to our alum and it comes to our salt, we're going to order in bulk when we get it, so that we have enough material on hand. We want to make sure, again, with our salt, we don't have iodized salt. We want non-iodized salt. And with our alum, remember that it's aluminum sulfate. It's what people use to change their hydrangeas different colors. So you can get this in bulk sometimes at a feed store, at a gardening supply center, things like that. And our salt we also picked up at the feed store, because people will put that out for cattle and things like that, the non-iodized kind. So we have a big bag of that, and we have a pallet of the aluminum sulfate, and that's what we're going to be using for this process. You want to have a way to make sure that you can weigh out your materials. When you're working in small batches, it's a little bit easier to weigh everything out and kind of keep it put up So you can go to Walmart or somewhere like that and get your small things of non-iodized salts. And when it comes to your alum, you can go and just get a bag or so at the gardening center. But make sure to save yourself some money. Don't buy that food grade alum, the powdered alum like you might find on Amazon. We started off with that and we made a mistake of spending a lot of money on it because we weren't understanding what it actually was. We thought we needed that type of, quote, alum powder. We didn't know what it exactly was, and so we were spending more money by buying what was labeled as alum powder. When we get these materials, we're going to have to weigh them out, as we were talking about with the book, where we need to make sure we know how much we're putting in with each gallon of water. We need to make sure we have the pounds weighed out with that. So you need some way to weigh your materials. We have a small food scale that we're using for that, but we're going to get into getting a little bit larger one later on so we can weigh out more materials. And also we've got into where instead of just having a separate pot and making this mixture on the stove top, we're going to have a way to get all our material ready outdoors for some of our bigger groups of hides. In the book by Matt Richards, there's a section about smoking. This refers to smoking the hides once you've got them through the tanning solution. It says smoke permanently changes the nature of the hide fibers. It makes it so that the skin can be washed many times and dry as soft as the first time with only a little help from you. Now, while we're mainly in this book going to be talking about how to turn buckskins that are hair off into crafts, clothes, things like that, this also applies to working with hair-on hides. Now, the reason we leave them hair on is because it's a really good way to get through the process for us. It's really simple to do, and people use them for backpack mounts, for different types of crafts. They'll use them for rugs, wall hangings, and things like that. So we're going to leave the hair on the hides, but we still need the smoking in this process. We're going to be, quote, tanning them with the salt and alum, but the true end to the process is to smoke them. We'll leave a sample of a scrap piece of hide out once we've done the salt and alum tanning part, and we won't smoke it to show you what we're talking about. But the best way to simply put it is that if you have these hides and you don't smoke them, especially when the temperatures drop, you get a little bit of moisture, it's almost like they get a crystallization on that underside, that flesh side. Apologies, we have a truck going over the hill here. But when we do the smoking part, we don't get that same result. We don't get that crystallization. The hides stay in really good shape. And you still need to do this even if they're hair on, just to help preserve them further. After we pull the hides out of the solution, the next step is going to be to get them dried out and stretching them. So one of the things we do, especially on smaller pieces of hide, to make them more pliable, especially people that have harvested a younger deer and it's going to be a little bit thinner, we will apply some neat's foot oil to that and let that soak in while we get ready to get everything stretched out. Once we get everything stretched, then we'll go on to the actual smoking process. But in between there's a few other steps that we'll cover on getting the hide softened up a little bit in an easier way, how to get it stretched out pretty easily. And again, there's a lot of different ways people do this. We're just going to show you how we go about it. And we'd love to hear any feedback on different ways that you tan and you get the hides prepared. If you're somebody that's already been into this process, and if you're new to it, don't just take our word for it. You can learn a little bit from this, but make sure you study up on your own and find ways that it works for you. One of the biggest things that we've tried to tell people to encourage them in this process is make sure to take notes. Write down what happened, what went wrong, try to correct it and learn why it happened. Trial and error with different methods. So try out the salt and the alum. Now, we've heard that this is one of the harder tanning methods to actually get it broke and get it stretched out while it's drying, that it's a lot more difficult. Some people will use different methods. Again, we don't do the brain tanning process, but some people will. Some people will use bottle tan formulas. We really want to try that this year. We've got 2 different formulas we're going to try with that. Some people will use egg tanning. That's one thing that Mr. Richards talks about, is how to use different natural methods, using the brains, using soap, using eggs, using bark tan. And I really enjoyed seeing some of their Instagram posts on how they're using bark to tan hides. It's really interesting, so make sure to go check them out as well. Again, we'll put a lot of links for you that are helpful in the description so you can see different things that we're talking about. Again, not only the Amazon affiliate links to different products that we actually use, but we'll also send you over to some of the like social media, like we're talking about for Mr. Richards and his group. And we'll show you other videos that we've made talking about some of these materials we're using and things like that. But again, what we're going to do now is get everything prepped. We're kind of just doing the introduction for everybody today. So what we'll do is go take our Rubbermaid and we'll pick up the hide. We'll make this into our part 2 of the video, but we'll go ahead and film it the same day. So what we're going to do is bring it back. Now, from our understanding, these hides are not cut off, they're actually air fleshed. So they use a air compressor and they use the air to take the hide off instead of cutting it off. So we should expect a little bit cleaner hide with these, hopefully. My understanding is that this first one, that it has the head still attached to it, so we're going to have to take that off. We're not going to show that part because it's probably going to be a little bit messy, but it's just basically going to involve cutting that part off. If the tail is on there, then we'll debone that. We have a tail stripper and a tail zipper that we'll use, and it works really well in tails. We need to pull that bone out, but the hide will still have the tail attached, hopefully. We'll also pick up some legs, and we'll show you if we can get those, what we're going to do to break those down. And what we'll do is bring it back, get the head removed, get the tail deboned, and then go around and take any of that membrane, any of that fat, that meat, things like that off of it before we go on to the next step. Hopefully you've enjoyed this first part, just kind of talking about the basics. And then in the next video, we'll start getting into what we're actually doing with these hides to get them ready. Hope you have a wonderful day, and thanks for joining us.